He grabbed the mic to mock her, told her to dance like it was a joke. But when the 66-year-old janitor moved, the entire room fell silent, and so did the man who thought he was in charge. They called it a celebration. Glassford International's annual shareholder appreciation gala. A mouthful, sure, but to most of the people in that grand hall in Dallas, it was just another excuse to show off wealth they didn't earn and sip cocktails they couldn't pronounce. The ballroom was polished like a magazine spread. Crystal lighting, imported marble floors, tables with centerpieces so tall they blocked conversation. Waiters in tight black vests weaved through crowds, topping off wine glasses and pretending not to listen to the small talk that dripped with arrogance. In the middle of it all stood Braxton Kilmer, CEO, early 40s, flashy, confident in a way that crossed the line into smug every time he opened his mouth. He wore a navy velvet blazer and grinned like someone used to being the most important man in the room. Maybe he was, at least until that night. And somewhere near the back, by the buffet table, half shielded by floral arrangements and barely noticed by anyone, was Odessa Brinkley. 66. Quiet, hair pulled into a neat bun. Her uniform was faded navy, with a name patch she had sewn back on herself. Odessa had arrived early and stayed late every day for the past 12 years. She knew every hallway, every light switch, every stain on that carpet. But tonight, she stayed longer than she had to. Not for the people, certainly not for the wine, but because she'd noticed a wobble in one of the serving tables and didn't want anyone getting hurt. That's Odessa. Steady. Invisible to most. But always watching. The clock neared 9:00 p.m. The main speeches had started. Braxton had the mic now. He was already a few drinks in, loosening his tie as he paced near the stage, throwing compliments that sounded more like rehearsed ads. "And let's not forget the real heroes," he joked. "Like the cleaning crew, keeping things spotless while we make the big moves." A couple people chuckled, unsure whether to laugh or cringe. Then his eyes landed on her. "Hey, Odessa," he said, leaning forward and pointing with exaggerated flair. "Come on now, don't be shy. Give us a little dance, will ya? Let's see those moves." A few people laughed, half out of discomfort, half because they didn't want to be the only ones who didn't. Phones came out. Some zoomed in. Others just watched, waiting to see if this old woman in a work shirt would make a fool of herself. Odessa looked up. For a second, her eyes didn't blink. She didn't move. She just stood there, broom in hand, next to a half-empty tray of bruschetta. Then she set the broom down gently and stepped forward. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. She simply walked to the center of the floor, unbothered by the gazes, by the phones, by the fact that the CEO had just made her the butt of the joke, and she began to turn. A single pirouette, then another, her body centered, graceful, controlled. A développé next, leg extending slowly. Perfect alignment, even in worn sneakers. The room went still. Someone dropped their fork. The laughter died before it could even register. And Odessa, with her arms raised just high enough to finish the line of her movement, finished with a small bow. Nothing exaggerated, just precision and poise. People didn't know whether to clap. One man at the back murmured, "That wasn't a joke. That was art." And Braxton? He stood frozen. Smile cracked, glass in hand. He laughed again, a stiff little sound, as if trying to reset the room. But no one joined him. But the silence didn't stay silent for long, because while Odessa quietly returned to her broom, someone in the crowd had already uploaded the clip. By the time Odessa reached the service hallway, she could already hear whispers behind the double doors. Not words, just that scattered hush that follows a moment nobody knows how to talk about yet. She didn't rush. She picked up her broom, checked the back of her shirt for dust, and wheeled her cart down the corridor like she always did. It wasn't the first time someone tried to put her on display, and it likely wouldn't be the last. But they hadn't expected that. Not that Odessa cared what they expected. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted. What had been a smug, alcohol-laced parade of egos had turned tense. You could feel it in the nervous chuckles, the murmurs between executives, the guests staring at their phones in disbelief. And Braxton? He was trying to keep the show going. Now that's what I call team spirit, he said into the mic, voice cracking slightly as he raised his glass. Let's give her a hand. A few people clapped. Soft, uneven applause. The kind that says, I don't know what just happened, more than it says, good job. But there was something different in the air. A crack in the performance. People who'd barely glanced at Odessa before were now watching the video replay on their phones. One guest, a woman from the Phoenix branch named Lark Newberry, whispered to her husband, Did you see her arms? That's not some TikTok shuffle. That's trained ballet. The whisper grew into rumor into a search. And by the time Odessa reached the maintenance office downstairs, her name was already trending on Twitter. She didn't know it yet. She was wiping down the wheels of her mop bucket, sipping ginger tea from a thermos she always kept in her locker. Her hands ached more these days, especially at night. But that didn't stop her from keeping them moving. Idle hands, as her late husband used to say, make for a noisy mind. Outside the ballroom, a young employee, Kendall Flannery, just hired 3 months ago, sat on a bench, staring at the clip he'd taken. He didn't mean to catch anything historic. He just thought it would be funny to post. But now, watching Odessa's turn in slow motion, the joke had shifted. The way she held her spine, the way her eyes didn't blink. Kendall had goosebumps. He clicked post before he could think twice. Caption: CEO mocks janitor. Janitor responds with this. Hashtags: Odessa Brinkley. Ballet not broom. Grace under fire. Within an hour, it had crossed 200,000 views. But Odessa didn't know. She finished her shift, clocked out. Walked 3 blocks to her bus stop like she always did. Plastic bag in hand with a sandwich she'd saved from the catering tray. She sat on the bench and read from a worn copy of The Bluest Eye, thumb smoothing the page corners out of habit. A teenager across from her tapped her phone screen, then looked up. Hey, was that you? She asked. Odessa looked over. In the video, the girl added. The one where the old guy makes you dance and you do that spin thing. Odessa blinked slowly, closing her book. I suppose it was, she said. That was sick, the girl grinned. My mum was a dancer. Said your form was better than hers ever was. Odessa gave a polite nod and returned to her reading. The girl kept staring a second longer, then smiled and went back to scrolling. That was the first of many. The next morning, Odessa's niece, Raelle Brinkley, who lived in Shreveport, called her 3 times. When Odessa finally picked up, Raelle was out of breath. Auntie Des, you're everywhere, she said. Your video's on the front page of everything. The Today Show posted it. You're trending. You're a meme now. Odessa squinted. A what? A meme. Like, funny pictures with words, except this one's respectful. It says, she swept the floor and the room. Raelle burst out laughing. Odessa didn't. Instead, she sat at the edge of her bed and looked at her palms. Raelle, she said softly. You remember when your mama used to say some spotlights burn too hot? Raelle stopped laughing. Yeah, let's hope this ain't one of those. Because Odessa Brinkley had learned a long time ago, some people clap because they mean it. Some clap to avoid guilt, and some clap while planning how to turn you into a product. But the video kept spreading, and not everyone was watching it quietly. By 7:30 the next morning, Odessa's face was on 5 different TikTok accounts, 2 news blogs, and a trending post on Reddit titled, She's not just a janitor, she's a damn ballerina. Most of the people sharing the video didn't know her name yet, but they were already calling her the Cleaning Swan. The clip wasn't long, just 29 seconds, but it had a rhythm. It opened with Braxton's voice over the mic. Come on, Odessa, give us a little dance, followed by a few chuckles and someone saying, Man, is he serious? Then Odessa's slow walk forward, her careful turn, that extended leg in mid-air, and a small, still bow. No words, just movement, pure, quiet skill. And that was the part people couldn't stop watching. By mid-morning, a longer version surfaced from someone who had been filming from across the room. You could see Braxton clearly, glass in hand, smirking before he called her out. Then his face changing as Odessa moved, the discomfort creeping in, the forced smile. Then the awkward clapping. That longer clip hit harder. People commented, he thought he was the main character. She reminded him who the story belongs to. She gave him the floor and took the room. There's a difference between performance and presence. She's got presence. Then came the think pieces. A small blog out of Albuquerque ran a post called The Mockery of Labor and the Grace of Odessa Brinkley. The author, someone named Dinah Rogan, wrote, "In a single spin, Odessa Brinkley exposed how we treat the invisible people who make the visible possible. While the powerful watched her to be entertained, she reminded them that dignity isn't granted. It's carried. Some carry it through speeches, some through shoes caked in polish and bruised knees that never gave out." It went viral, too. Odessa's niece called again around noon. "Auntie, you need to see this. You're on CNN. They're asking who you are. Do you want me to tell them?" Odessa sighed. "No." "You sure? They said you used to dance. They want to know more. You could—" "I said no, Rael. Let them wonder. That's enough." But it wasn't enough. Not for the world, because the world hadn't just seen Grace. They saw a power move wrapped in poise. And people were hungry for something real, something unscripted, something that didn't smell like PR spin or celebrity branding. And this janitor with perfect posture was the opposite of spin. It took less than 24 hours for Glassford International's media team to start panicking. By the time Braxton arrived back at headquarters, the comms director, Linus Breyer, a thin man who never blinked enough, was already waiting with a tablet in hand. "Sir, we have a problem." Braxton looked like he hadn't slept. He yawned. "What now?" "The video's everywhere. Over 12 million views between platforms. You're trending for all the wrong reasons. The board's asking questions." Braxton scrolled through the feed. His jaw twitched. "They're turning this into a thing." She spun around, big deal. "I was being friendly." "Not how it's being received." "Of course not, because nobody has a sense of humor anymore." Linus cleared his throat. "Sir, with all due respect." It wasn't funny. Braxton narrowed his eyes. "We should issue a statement." Linus continued. "Say it was a misunderstanding, that you've always admired her. Something short and neutral. I'm not apologizing for making a joke. It won't look like an apology. It'll read as acknowledgement. I don't care how it reads, Linus. It was a party. I was being generous." But in that moment, even Braxton could feel it. The energy had shifted. He wasn't in control of the story anymore. That afternoon, #Odessa Brinkley trended higher than the NBA Finals. Celebrities reposted the clip. A dancer from the San Francisco Ballet retweeted it saying, "You don't learn that balance overnight. That's decades of discipline." And in the comments, people started asking the same question. Who is she? What's her story? That night, Odessa sat in her kitchen, wearing the same soft cotton robe she'd had since her 40s. She sipped from a chipped teacup, watched the rain slide down the window pane, and listened to a voicemail from an unknown number. "Hi, Miss Brinkley. My name's Evie Rollins. I'm the director at the Dunlap Center for the Performing Arts in Tulsa. We came across the video and were wondering if you'd ever be interested in mentoring young dancers. No rush. We just wanted to say, we see you." Odessa didn't call back. Not yet. Instead, she deleted the message, folded her robe tighter, and went to bed early. But while she was trying to quiet the noise, Braxton was doing the exact opposite. And the next day, he was about to make it worse. The thing about Odessa Brinkley was, she didn't talk much. People assumed that meant she had nothing to say. But silence doesn't mean emptiness. Sometimes it just means someone's carrying more than you'll ever understand. That weekend, while reporters scrambled to identify her and TikTok teenagers called her ballerina grandma, Odessa was in her living room, dusting the picture frames on her mantel. She moved slowly. Each photo held a piece of her history, though none of them told the full story. A black and white snapshot of her in point shoes, arms lifted, eyes tilted to the rafters. One with her younger brother at their childhood home in Texarkana. One with her daughter, Alice, on her first day of kindergarten. before the car crash, before the long months in recovery, before Odessa gave up on ever returning to a stage. No one at Glassford knew who she used to be. Why would they? Most had never looked her in the eye. But 25 years ago, Odessa Brinkley had her name printed in the programs of the Nouvelle Atlanta Ballet Ensemble, one of only a few black soloists at the time. She toured through Seattle, San Diego, Memphis. People cried after her performances. Critics called her style fluent, grounded, impossibly controlled. And then came the accident. She was in the passenger seat. Her husband Elijah was driving. A distracted trucker ran a red light outside Baton Rouge. Odessa survived with fractured ribs, torn ligaments, and a damaged hip. Elijah didn't survive at all. She spent 6 months learning to walk again. Her dance career never recovered. But the pain she carried wasn't just in her body. It was in the silence. The way people looked at her, like she was broken, like she used to be something, but now she was just someone. Even the ballet company moved on quickly, replacing her without ceremony. So Odessa did what survivors do. She got a job cleaning offices. At first it was temporary, just to get back on her feet. Then her daughter needed braces. Then her mother got sick. And before she knew it, 12 years had passed. She never told anyone at Glassford who she was. What would have been the point? They didn't see her before. They just saw someone who scrubbed their floors. That weekend, Rael drove in from Shreveport. She brought groceries and a tablet so Odessa could see the videos everyone was talking about. "You sure you want to be out of the loop?" Rael asked, unbagging apples and cereal. "I mean, you went viral. In a good way. For once the internet ain't being cruel." Odessa just sat at the table, stirring sugar into her coffee. "It'll pass." Rael shook her head. "You always do this. You wait for things to fade. But this time's different, Auntie. People care. Like really care." Odessa said nothing. Her eyes drifted to the old dance photo on the wall. Her body used to float through air like silk on wind. Now her knees popped when she bent too fast. Rael slid the tablet over. "Just watch one," Odessa hesitated, then tapped the screen. The clip began to play. The sound of Braxton's voice. The laughter. Then her figure stepping forward. The movement. The bow. She watched it all. And something changed. Not in her face. Odessa had long since learned how to keep her emotions in check. But in the way her hand relaxed around the cup. The way her posture straightened without her thinking about it. "I look old," she murmured. "You look real," Rael said. "And strong." Odessa turned the screen off. Later that evening, while she was folding laundry, her house phone rang. Not many people still used it, but the voice on the other end nearly stopped her heart. "Miss Brinkley? This is Madison Arlo. We danced together back in '87. I was third understudy at Nouvelle. Remember? I saw your video. I can't believe I'm saying this, but you look even more grounded now than you did then. It's so good to see you, even if it's from a phone screen." Odessa was silent for a long moment. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means something." They talked for over 20 minutes, mostly about the old days. The struggle, the grind, how the ballet world had barely made room for them then, and how little had changed now. But when they hung up, Odessa stood up and walked to her bedroom closet. She opened the old cedar box at the bottom. Inside were her ballet shoes, the same ones she wore the night she fractured her toe during Swan Lake, but still finished the piece without a flinch. She held them gently, like they were glass. But she didn't cry, because Odessa knew the spotlight might be behind her, but her light wasn't gone. Monday morning hit like a cold slap to the face at Glassford International. The board had called an emergency PR alignment meeting, not because they cared deeply about Odessa Brinkley, but because they cared about numbers. And Glassford's stock had taken a 2.8% dip over the weekend. Not massive, but enough to spark nervous chatter among investors. Braxton Kilmer walked in late, sunglasses still on, iced coffee in hand. He didn't speak right away. He didn't have to. His presence usually sucked all the air out of a room on arrival. But today, nobody stood to greet him. A few heads tilted. Eyes avoided his. At the head of the long conference table, Serena Klein, one of the newer board members and a former litigation consultant, tapped her pen against a notepad. "We need to talk about the video," she said flatly. Braxton dropped into a chair. "Oh, we're still on that?" Serena didn't even blink. "It's trending in Japan now." He laughed. "International reach. Free publicity. You're welcome." "Braxton," she said, her voice clipped. "This is serious." That word, serious, had started haunting him lately. He had tried to make things go away before, paid for stories to vanish, settled lawsuits quietly. He was used to shaping his narrative. But this was different. This wasn't a legal matter. This was public perception, and it was slipping out of his grip. "We want you to meet with her," said Linus, the communications director. "Odessa, today," Braxton arched a brow. "And do what?" "Apologize. To a janitor." You could feel the air tighten. Someone shifted in their seat. Serena leaned forward. "To a human being, who, by the way, made you look small without even raising her voice." Braxton exhaled sharply. Annoyed. But he wasn't stupid. He agreed. At 2:30 that afternoon, Odessa was brought into one of the glass-walled executive lounges on the 15th floor. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling. The chairs were sleek, uncomfortable. She sat quietly, her hands folded, legs crossed at the ankle. Braxton walked in alone, no PR handler in sight. That was his first mistake. "Odessa," he said, flashing his usual smile. "Thanks for making time. I know things have been a little wild lately." Odessa didn't move, so I've heard. Braxton sat across from her, leaning back like this was just another chat. "Listen, I wanted to say, I didn't mean any harm. It was all in good fun." She looked at him. "No one asked what you meant," she said softly. The smile slipped a notch. "I was just trying to lighten the mood. Parties get stiff." They were stiff before I walked in. Braxton blinked. Odessa tilted her head, her voice steady. "You didn't call on me to share joy. You called on me to be laughed at. That's different." He cleared his throat. "Well, the video's gotten a lot of attention. You've gone viral. That's got to feel good, right?" Odessa shook her head, not with anger, but like a mother correcting a child who should have known better. "That's your problem, Mr. Kilmer. You think being seen is always a reward." Braxton sat up straighter now. The conversation wasn't going how he thought it would. "I just wanted to say sorry, okay?" he snapped. "No," Odessa said calmly. "You wanted to be seen saying sorry." That silenced him. For a few seconds, the only sound was the whisper of traffic through the glass. Then Odessa stood. "I don't need your apology," she said. "I needed your respect, but I've gone my whole life without it from men like you. I'll be just fine." She turned and walked out, leaving him staring at the city below. Later that evening, Braxton released a public statement on social media. It read, "I want to acknowledge the moment that has been circulating online. My intent was never to embarrass or mock anyone. I hold deep respect for all members of the Glassford family and recognize the immense contribution of Ms. Odessa Brinkley. I apologize if my words were taken the wrong way. It was weak, and it didn't land." The comments said everything. Taken the wrong way? Try given the wrong way. Why didn't you just say, "I messed up," and mean it? Odessa Brinkley has more class in one spin than you've got in your whole PR team. Meanwhile, Odessa sat in her kitchen again, her tea steeping quietly, the tablet screen dimmed beside her. She didn't read the statement. Rael did. "He said he respects you," her niece said with a scoff. Odessa smiled without humor. "He respects what people saw in me, not what I am." Rael paused. "What are you, Auntie?" Odessa looked out the window. "I'm someone who learned a long time ago not to dance for applause." But the world kept clapping, and the echoes were reaching people Odessa hadn't heard from in years. By Wednesday, Odessa Brinkley had 3 voice messages from old colleagues, a bouquet on her porch from the Dunlap Center, and a handwritten letter from someone she hadn't thought about in nearly 3 decades. She recognized the handwriting before she even opened it. Claudine Yates, one of her closest friends during her performing years. Claudine had been the kind of dancer who never needed a mirror to know her lines were clean. They had toured together, trained together, and once slept on a train station bench in Montreal during a delayed connection. It had been that kind of life. Unpredictable, tiring, glorious, but life got in the way. It always does. Odessa opened the envelope slowly. It had been years since she'd seen real cursive. Des, I watched the video a dozen times. I cried every time. I remembered the way you used to tilt your head slightly before every spin, like you were listening to music only you could hear. You haven't lost it. Not one bit. And the world finally saw what I've known for years. We never got to do that final show in St. Louis. I remember you were going to wear the green sash. Elijah said you looked like you were glowing. I hope you feel that again, even if just for a moment. If you ever want to teach, my niece opened a small dance school in Baton Rouge. They'd lose their minds to meet you. With love always, Claudine Odessa folded the letter slowly. Her hand lingered on the last line. That day she called Rael. I think I might take up that mentorship offer. Rael almost dropped the phone. Wait, what? Not full-time, just a few hours a week. I'd like to show someone how to move without fear again. Rael was quiet for a second, then said, They don't know how lucky they are. The Dunlap Center was ecstatic. They offered her a part-time mentorship role, helping with technical training and artistic development for advanced students. Odessa made it clear. She didn't want media involved, no press release, no photo ops. Just work. Quiet work. The first time she walked into the dance studio in Tulsa, it hit her like a forgotten song. The smell of rosin, the soft thump of feet across hardwood. Mirrors, light pouring through high windows, bars worn down by decades of fingers gripping for balance. And there she was, in a room again. Not to perform, not to prove, but to pass on. The students didn't know what to expect. Some had watched the video. Some hadn't. But the moment Odessa began moving, just simple things at first, posture corrections, weight transfers, floor placement, every head turned. They could feel it. That unspoken energy. One of the students, a sharp and skeptical 17-year-old named Hollis Boudreau, asked the question straight out during a break. You really used to dance full-time? Odessa didn't look offended. She simply nodded. For how long? 18 years. What happened? Odessa looked at her, not with sadness, but with a kind of clarity that doesn't blink. Life. It happened? Hollis stared, then smiled and said, I hope mine doesn't get in the way that long. Odessa tilted her head. Don't be afraid if it does. Just make sure you're ready when it lets you dance again. That became her rhythm. Weekdays at Glassford, Sundays and Tuesdays at Dunlap. Her life didn't change dramatically, but something in her chest felt lighter, like her lungs had finally stopped holding their breath. Back at Glassford, employees started treating her differently. Some genuinely, some out of guilt. A few apologized. Awkward, nervous attempts to say, we didn't know, without saying, we never bothered to ask. But Odessa didn't seek revenge or attention. She just kept her routine. One afternoon, an intern named Noel Hartley caught up with her in the break room. Miss Brinkley, she said, I saw a photo of you in a black leotard, mid-jump. You looked like you were flying. Odessa raised an eyebrow. That was a long time ago. Well, it's still flying, even if it happened back then. Odessa smiled gently. Then I hope you remember that when you have your own flight to take. But not everyone was ready to move on, and someone very high up was beginning to feel the walls close in. While the internet was flooded with praise and reposts, and while Odessa was quietly shaping a new rhythm between the mop bucket and the ballet bar, there were things that no video, no viral clip, no trending hashtag had captured. Like the night Odessa sat alone in her bedroom, feet soaking in warm water, staring at her swollen ankles, or the way she pressed her fingers into the soft spot beneath her right knee, the one that still ached from the surgery in '96, even though the doctors had promised it would heal clean. There was no audience for that, no applause, just the quiet creak of aging bones and a woman alone with thoughts that never stayed silent. Earlier that day, Rael had said something Odessa couldn't shake. You were meant to do this, Auntie. To teach. To be seen again. It wasn't meant cruelly, but it clung to Odessa like wet cloth. Because while Rael meant seen as in celebrated, Odessa knew a different kind of scene. She knew what it felt like to be spotlighted for entertainment, then discarded the minute you stopped performing. She'd lived through that once already. The first time she felt it was at a cast party in Memphis, 1985. She had danced the final pas de deux of the season, broken toe and all, and still brought the house down. Her co-lead was late to the after-party, and the company director, a man named Roland Jessup, raised his glass in her direction and said, "Guess we've got our little miracle right here. Bet you didn't think the janitor's daughter would end up our prima for the night?" Everyone laughed. Odessa didn't. It was a joke. Sure, just like Braxton's. The same flavor of mockery hidden behind a wink. Like Grace didn't belong to her. Like her background made her presence a surprise. Even back then, she remembered the weight of it. Not the words, the expectation behind them. That she was only special if she stayed surprising. And once the novelty wore off, back to the shadows. That's why the applause now felt complicated. Because it wasn't that she didn't appreciate the attention, it was that she didn't trust it. Attention came easy when people felt inspired. But where were they when you were limping home on a bus, holding your ribs and pretending it didn't hurt? That night, Odessa opened her closet and pulled out an old shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were photos, letters, and one small audio cassette. Labeled in faded ink, Elijah, March 1993. She pulled out her dusty cassette player, popped the tape in, and hit play. Elijah's voice came through, soft and calm, like it hadn't been silenced all those years ago. "You always tell me you don't need no stage. And maybe you don't. But baby, you were born to move. That's just the truth. You walk like the music's under your feet. Don't you ever let a room full of suits decide when you stop dancing." Her eyes welled. But she didn't wipe them, because the truth was, no matter how many articles were written, no matter how many news anchors smiled through segments about her elegance or surprise talent, none of them knew her story the way Elijah did. None of them knew how many times she'd nearly quit. How many nights she sat in the dark, rehearsing steps she could no longer do. The cameras didn't catch her crying in the staff restroom the week after Elijah's funeral, still in uniform, still showing up to work because the rent didn't wait for grief. They didn't see the missed birthdays, the swollen hands from scrubbing industrial tile, the way her daughter once asked, "Mama, did you ever dream of doing something else?" They didn't see her say yes, then lie awake all night wondering if she'd already let that dream go. So when people clapped for her now, after 29 seconds of captured grace, she couldn't help but feel the weight of all the invisible years. She still moved slowly through the halls of Glassford, mop in hand, back straight. She didn't walk like someone trying to be noticed. She walked like someone who already knew who she was. A custodian, a dancer, a widow, a mother. And that balance, that stillness beneath it all, it came from surviving rooms where she was laughed at, and never losing her rhythm anyway. But far above her in the executive suite, that rhythm was starting to sound like a countdown, one Braxton Kilmer couldn't ignore much longer. On the 21st floor of Glassford International, the air was different. It wasn't fear, not exactly, but it was close. Conversations got shorter, doors closed faster. Eye contact became scarce, especially when Braxton Kilmer walked through. For years, his name had been synonymous with confidence, the kind that made deals over cocktails and treated criticism like static noise. But this wasn't static. It was organized discomfort. And it was growing. Investors had begun to murmur. Not loudly, but they didn't have to. Just one voicemail from Jonas Ferrell, the CFO of a West Coast tech firm that held a 7% stake in Glassford stock, had Braxton snapping his pen in half during a board call. "We're pulling our position. Don't worry. It's not just about the janitor thing. It's about how you handled it. I don't think the company can afford your instincts anymore." The email that followed was colder. Subject: leadership misalignment. Body: we can't attach our brand to someone who views humility as an inconvenience. Braxton paced his office, windows reflecting his own image back at him. The same image that had sold products, boosted stock, charmed rooms. Now it just looked like a liability in a suit. He called Linus. "Fix it." Linus sighed. You can't fix character in a press release. Don't give me that. What do we do? Offer her a scholarship in her name? A dance program? Hell, give her a parking spot." Linus paused. "Or maybe step back and let the company do what it needs to." Braxton's voice dropped. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means the board's talking, sir. Quietly, for now. But not for long." And that's when the walls began to close in. Serena Klein scheduled a closed-door meeting for Thursday afternoon. No assistants, no recorders, just 6 people and a single item on the agenda: Braxton's future. Downstairs, Odessa was refilling paper towel dispensers. She had no idea her grace had started a slow-motion avalanche. But employees knew. One by one, people who used to ignore her now nodded respectfully in the halls. Some even stopped to ask how she was doing. Sincere or not, it was a change. That afternoon, as she mopped the break room, a man from the accounting department, Glenn Rainey, soft-spoken and allergic to drama, walked in with a coffee. "I know this might sound strange," he said, gently. "But thanks." Odessa didn't stop mopping. "For what?" "For showing the rest of us that it's okay not to be invisible." She didn't reply, just smiled politely and kept moving. But upstairs, the discussion was anything but polite. "Braxton's arrogance didn't just create a viral moment," Serena said, seated with her hands clasped calmly. "It exposed our values, or lack of them." One board member, Howard Jesner, tried to defend him. "He's grown this company for 7 straight quarters. And lost the public's trust in 3 days," Serena shot back. The room fell silent. For the first time in a long time, Braxton had no control over the narrative. Later that evening, someone leaked that a leadership review was underway. The article ran quietly, buried beneath bigger headlines. But it was enough. Within 24 hours, reporters were calling it the Brinkley effect. Nobody saw that coming, least of all Braxton. He found out while scrolling news on his phone, sitting alone in the executive lounge. The headline read, "How a janitor's dance put a CEO on the edge." He nearly threw the phone across the room. But even in his frustration, part of him knew it wasn't just the dance. It was the truth it forced people to see. For years he'd performed power. Odessa had shown people what real grace looked like, and the contrast was too sharp to ignore. Meanwhile, at the Dunlap Center, Odessa wrapped up a class with the advanced students. She watched them stretch, stumble, get back up. She didn't say much, but when they got frustrated, she had one line she always returned to. "Balance comes from knowing where your weight is. Not just your body, your pride too." It stuck. They repeated it in the locker room, wrote it in notebooks. She hadn't planned on becoming someone's mentor this late in life. But maybe late didn't mean over. Maybe it just meant right on time. But back at Glassford, the clock was ticking, and Braxton was running out of people willing to reset it for him. Saturday evening in Tulsa was unusually quiet. Rain had started to fall, soft and steady, casting streaks against the windows of the Dunlap Center for the Performing Arts. Inside, the small studio buzzed with preparation, but not for a recital or a fundraiser. This one wasn't advertised. No banners, no ticket sales, just an invitation-only gathering to honor someone the world had nearly overlooked. Odessa had resisted the idea at first. She didn't need a tribute, didn't crave attention, but when the center's director, Evie Rollins, assured her it would be small, just family, students, and a few close friends, she finally agreed. Under one condition. No lights, no platform, just the floor, and no speeches. Evie smiled. "Only the dancing, then?" Odessa nodded. "Only the dancing." The studio had been rearranged, mirrors covered, chairs placed around the perimeter. A simple wooden floor in the center. No spotlights, no announcement, just space. When Odessa arrived, the room fell quiet. She wore a loose gray top and black practice pants. Her shoes weren't fresh. They had years in them, but they fit like skin. As she crossed the room, a hush settled over everyone. Not the awkward kind. The reverent kind. The kind that fills in when people know they're about to see something they don't want to miss. She stood still at first. Then the music began. A cello solo, played live by a student she had quietly coached on posture just 2 weeks before. No crescendo, just a slow, aching melody that moved like a memory trying not to fade. And Odessa moved, not like the clip that had gone viral. This was slower, deeper. Her body didn't spin as fast now, but every step had weight. Every extension had story. Every pause gave breath to something buried long ago. In one motion, she lifted her arm. Not high, but just enough. It spoke louder than any words could have. She wasn't dancing for applause this time. She was dancing for Elijah, for the child she raised, for the stage she never got to return to, for the pain she carried in silence, for the janitor's closet, for the ballet shoes tucked in a box for 2 decades, for herself. By the end, she stood still again, hand on her chest. No bow, just a nod of acknowledgement. Not to the crowd, but to the journey. The room remained silent until a student named Hollis whispered, "Thank you." Then came the applause. Real applause. The kind that comes not from excitement, but from being humbled. Raelle was there, tears in her eyes, hands together, lips pressed tight. Evie approached Odessa quietly, later, in the corner. "You still have it, you know." Odessa chuckled softly. "I never lost it. I just put it somewhere safe." As guests began to leave, one of the dancers approached her with a sketchbook. "I drew this last night," she said shyly. "It's you, from the video. I didn't get the arms right, but..." Odessa flipped through the pages. The drawing was rough, but the lines were strong, intentional. She smiled. "You got the stillness right. That's harder than arms." Later that night, as she changed out of her shoes in the dressing room, her phone buzzed on the bench beside her. A text from Linus at Glassford. "Braxton has officially resigned. Board accepted it this morning. Just thought you should know." Odessa stared at the screen, then turned it off. No reaction, no celebration. She didn't need to hear it. She had already known. You can't mock grace without getting tripped by it. When she stepped out into the rain, it didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. Raelle offered her a ride, but she shook her head. "I'll walk a bit," she said. "You sure?" Odessa nodded. "I've got music in my head. It needs somewhere to go." She walked slowly, heels barely lifting off the pavement, but her back was straight and her eyes were steady. She didn't need lights or platforms or applause to validate the years she'd lived. Because grace had never been about performance. It had always been about presence. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. There was still one more thing the world needed to learn. Monday came like any other. Glassford International replaced Braxton Kilmer's name on their leadership page with a grey interim CEO badge. The press issued cautious headlines. Executive shakeup follows viral moment. CEO exit amid cultural backlash. They didn't mention Odessa Brinkley by name. Not at first. Just a long-time employee involved in a public incident. But those who had watched, really watched, knew exactly who she was. The moment may have passed for headlines, but something deeper had shifted in its wake. Quiet, maybe, but real. Odessa returned to her usual routine. Weeknights cleaning, Tuesdays and Sundays teaching. Same shoes, same thermos, same key ring jangling softly as she walked the glass halls. Only now, people made space. Not out of pity, but recognition. Like they finally realized she'd been there the whole time. She noticed it in the small things. The way Noel from HR asked if she wanted a chair during breaks. The way Glenn from accounting started saying, "Ms. Brinkley," like it was a title. The way security waved before she did. Even the woman at the front desk, Jasmine Ledoux, who used to scroll through her phone while Odessa passed, stood up one day and said, "I saw you on that video. You made me cry. I just wanted to say, thank you." Odessa paused at that. Gave her a smile so soft it barely formed. "You're welcome," she said. "But it wasn't a performance." Jasmine blinked. "What was it then?" Odessa looked past her, out through the lobby glass, where the world moved in and out, blind as ever to the people who swept behind them. "A reminder," she said. "That dignity doesn't come with the title on your badge. It's how you carry yourself when no one's clapping." That line stuck with Jasmine. She wrote it in a sticky note and taped it to her computer. By the end of that week, the Dunlap Center had received nearly 50 new applications. Young dancers, older ones, some hadn't trained in years. One applicant wrote, "I stopped dancing when my mother passed. I saw Ms. Brinkley's video and it reminded me who I used to be." Odessa read every message. Carefully. She never responded directly. But she remembered the names. Because she knew what it felt like to forget yourself. To be looked at and not seen. To be talked about but never spoken to. The viral video would fade. They all did. But Odessa had never needed it in the first place. She'd been dancing long before TikTok knew how to spell ballet. She'd been surviving in silence, graceful in spaces that had no grace for her. And now, she wasn't teaching steps anymore. She was teaching something else entirely. At the end of each Tuesday session, she gave her students 5 minutes. No choreography, no mirrors, just music and movement. "Find your own rhythm," she'd say. "Not the one people expect, the one that feels like yours." And they'd move, some awkwardly, some with a kind of truth that hadn't found words yet. Because that was the lesson she had learned the hardest way. You are not here to be approved of. You are here to be honest with your own body, your own weight, your own balance. One night, as she locked up the studio, Hollis asked her, "Do you think they'll remember your name in 10 years?" Odessa didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "Maybe, maybe not. But they'll remember what they felt. That's more important." The rain had started again. She walked home without an umbrella. Not because she didn't have one. She just didn't mind the rain anymore. Because after all these years, Odessa Brinkley had finally taught the world what she'd always known. That elegance isn't in a title, or a spotlight, or a paycheck. It's in the stillness between movements. The way you stand when no one's watching. The choice to never shrink, even when mocked. And the strength to move anyway. If this story made you feel something, share it. Let someone know that quiet strength exists all around us, often in the people we overlook the most. Subscribe for more stories that remind us who we are and who we've forgotten to see.